be an active and effective participant in ensuring our children are healthy, well cared for, and ready to become the next leaders in our goal of winning the global economic race. I thank the Senator from Maine for yielding time. I look forward to continuing to work with her until we reach a successful conclusion and our amendment is agreed to. I thank the Senator.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Maine.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the Senator from Colorado for his excellent remarks. Both of us share the goal that all Americans share for our children of making sure that they get a healthy diet. And for many children, it is so critical that the school lunch and school breakfast program provide that diet. Unfortunately, the USDA's rule does not in many ways comply with the dietary guidelines which recognize that Americans of all ages tend to be short on two particular nutrients, potassium and fiber, that potatoes are abundant in providing. You know, when we think of potassium, most of us think of bananas. But in fact, as this chart shows, the potato actually has far more potassium in it than a banana. And indeed, and ironically, the dietary guidelines for all Americans include an appendix exclusively listing foods that are rich in potassium. And a baked potato is the first vegetable listed because it is such an excellent source of potassium. Potatoes can also serve as vehicles for other vegetables. I recently discussed this issue with the Director of School Nutrition for two communities in Maine, York and Kittery, Maine. Her name is Doris Demers. Doris told me that the kids in her school system rave about baked potato bars where they can load baked potatoes with broccoli, shaved carrots, chives, salsa, vegetarian chili, beans, and many other healthful items. Doris also pointed out to me that this is a particularly popular option for students who are vegetarians and that they're seeing an increasing number of students who are vegetarians in their school systems. Yet, Mr. President, if this rule were to go into effect, a school serving a medium baked potato on Monday would be prevented from serving a full portion of potatoes or corn at any other lunch during that week. Think how absurd that resulted. These two vegetables, corn and potatoes, are central to a variety of dishes: soups, chowders, stews, vegetable pie, shepherd's pie. One food service director told me of her school's attempt to get children to eat fresh whole foods rather than heavily processed foods. Thus, she developed a farm-to-school program in cooperation with a local farmer. The students actually went out into the field, picked the corn, husked it themselves, and then were served the corn for lunch, enjoying the experience of consuming wholesome, locally grown food. Yet, as she has pointed out to me, the USDA's proposed rule would prevent her from serving an ear of fresh corn one day of the week and a baked potato another day of the same week. That is an utterly absurd result. That's why people get so frustrated with some of the regulations that come out of Washington. Mr. President, I'm also very concerned about the impact on the school breakfast program. It is a voluntary program, unlike the school lunch program. some school districts could be forced to drop out of the breakfast program as a direct result of this rule because it could increase costs by up to 50 cents per breakfast. You start multiplying that across all the breakfasts served by these school systems, and you're soon talking about real money. This would be a disaster if schools chose to terminate their participation in the school breakfast program for those students who rely on this program. Only Washington could impose a rule that purports to improve school nutrition, but actually causes schools to drop out of the very program that's supposed to provide that nutrition. In fact, Mr. President, many of our colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus in the House have written to Secretary Vilsack expressing concerns regarding the new costs the proposed rule would impose on schools, particularly schools educating the highest percentage of low-income students. The letter goes on to note that, quote, for many low-income children, the best, if not all, of their nutrition comes from programs that the USDA administers, end quote. The letter points out that for many schools, they simply do not have the resources that can be diverted to meet such large cost increases. Research has shown us time and again that eating a healthy breakfast is critical to academic success. Eating breakfast also provides significant health benefits, as we all know. Not eating breakfast is associated with excess body weight, especially among children and adolescents, and consuming breakfast has been associated with weight loss and improved nutrition. Mr. President, I hope that USDA will listen to the concerns voiced by the professionals who manage these programs. The School Nutrition Association opposes this restriction and believes that, quote, the consumption of an array of fruits and vegetables should be encouraged and not limited. The following organizations are opposing the Department's proposed rule because it would increase costs and limit their flexibility. It includes the American Association of School Administrators, the National School Boards Association, the Council of Great City Schools, and the National Association of Elementary School Principals. In my state, the State Department of Education, the Maine PTA, the Maine School Management Association, and the Maine Principals Association have all expressed their support for my amendment, our amendment, and their opposition to the USDA's ill-conceived rule. These groups represent school administrators, superintendents, school boards, principals. They know, they oversee the school's food service programs, and they understand the difficulties and costs that this rule would cause. The Association of School Administrators, for example, wrote to express support for our amendment, saying, quote, the overly prescriptive nature of the requirements for providing fruits and vegetables increases the cost of meals so drastically that school districts implementing these changes, even receiving the higher reimbursement rate, would still be covered for less than half of the new expenses. The fact is, the proposed rule would impose significant and needless costs on our nation's school districts at a time when they can least afford it. Listen to what the cost of this rule is estimated by the Department of Agriculture itself to be. The USDA estimates that this rule could cost as much as $6.8 billion over the next 5 years. And, Mr. President, the lion's share of that cost is going to fall on state and local agencies. The costs associated with the proposed rule would also affect working families who rely on the school meal program. As one association wrote me, the USDA's proposed nutritional guidelines will force schools to raise paid meals prices. I would ask unanimous consent that the letters from all these organizations be printed in the record at the conclusion of my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, I hope that our colleagues will take a close look at this bipartisan amendment that Senator Udall and I are offering with the support of many of our colleagues. We need to ensure that our schools can maintain the flexibility that they need to serve healthy meals at an affordable cost. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, on behalf of Senator Murray of Washington, I ask consent to set aside pending amendments and to call up amendment number 772.
Without objection. Clerk will report.
The Senator from Illinois, Mr. Durbin, for Mrs. Murray, proposes amendment number 772 to amendment number 738.
Thank you, Mr. President.
First, I want to thank my
Senator from New York.
Mr. President, thank you. I want to thank my colleague from Illinois for letting me just take care of this matter, which I hope will be disposed of quickly. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-1721. No, sorry. I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak up to 10 minutes.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-1721, introduced earlier today.
Without objection, the clerk will report.
S-1721, a bill to amend Section 402 of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996 to extend the eligibility period for
I ask
Supplemental
unanimous
Security.
consent the bill be considered
Without
as read.
objection.
Mr.
Without
President,
objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask consent the bill be read a third time, that a budgetary pay-go statement be read, and that the Senate proceed to a vote on passage of the bill.
Without objection. The clerk will report.
Senator Conrad, this is a statement of budgetary effects of pay-go legislation for S-1721. Total budgetary effects of the S-1721 for the 5-year statutory pay-go school card, net decrease in the deficit of $24 million. Total budgetary effects of
I ask unanimous consent the entire statement be read into the record.
Without objection. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it, and the bill is passed.
I ask unanimous consent that the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table and that any statements related to the bill be placed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, just to speak for a minute on the bill we have just passed. This is a bill that I introduced a couple of weeks ago along with Senators Leahy, Gillibrand, Menendez, Franken, and Klobuchar. I thank them for their co-sponsorship. It's called the SSI Extension for Elderly and Disabled Refugees Act of 2011. The Senate has just held a voice vote and passed this bill, and I believe that's because it is a truly worthy piece of legislation. It accomplishes 3 incredibly important objectives at the same time. First, the bill ensures that approximately 5,600 disabled refugees will not lose their life-sustaining benefits that are their only safety net, protecting them from homelessness, illness, and other effects of extreme poverty. Many of the disabled refugees of this bill are people who have aided American troops overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. and have risked their lives for American causes, for the American cause. Others are victims of torture or human trafficking. The bill continues the Bush administration policy of making sure that this vulnerable group does not lose its only lifeline to stay afloat. But unlike past legislation, the second fact about the bill is that it's fully paid for. It's paid for by imposing a $30 fee on individuals applying for the Diversity Lottery Program, the Diversity Visa Lottery Program. Each year, hundreds of thousands of people apply to be one of the 50,000 selected to enter the U.S. This program has had great success enriching the American economy with immigrant businesses from countries that are not traditionally represented in our immigrant pool. The one problem with the program is that applying for a lottery ticket, quote unquote, is free. And consequently, the program has recently been compromised by third parties fraudulently filing applications for monetary gain. The State Department has told me that by charging a $30 fee to apply will completely eliminate this misconduct. So, finally, the third thing about this bill is that by setting the fee at $30, the Congressional Budget Office, our nonpartisan budget scorekeeper, projects we will actually reduce the deficit by $24 million. So in short, Mr. President, this bill hits the trifecta. It helps a very small and targeted group of the most vulnerable and needy disabled individuals who we've traditionally helped, including many who helped our troops in both Afghanistan and Iraq and have come here on the refugee program. Second, it eliminates the misconduct in the diversity visa program because once the $30 fee is imposed, there are the gamesmanship of those who are gaming this system to make money will disappear. And finally, it reduces the federal deficit by $24 million. Because this bill is a win-win-win for all sides, I ask that my colleagues in the House take up and pass the bill immediately. The benefit for the folks we're talking about expired on October 1st. If the House does not act soon, we will not be able to repair the irreparable harm that will soon be done to these most vulnerable of individuals when they begin missing checks. So again, I'd like to thank my co-sponsors, and particularly Senators Leahy and Grassley, Chairman and Ranking Member of the relevant Judiciary Committee, as well as Senators Baucus, Hatch, Chairman of Finance Committee, Cornyn and Sessions, Budget Committee, and Senator Cornyn, who's my ranking member on Immigration Subcommittee, for allowing this bill to pass. And I also want to thank Senator Coburn for working with me to improve this bill. Last but not least, I'd like to thank Senator Paul, who worked with me the last 2 weeks to address his concerns in a manner that we both think will allow us to get more information to make the refugee program safer and more efficient. We will soon be doing something very good by passing this bill, by getting this bill signed into law. And I hope that the House will move quickly and decisively to see that happen as quickly as possible. With that, Mr. President, I thank you and yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Ohio.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak as of morning business up to 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak about the prescription drug abuse epidemic that's sweeping my state and the nation. The rampant abuse and trafficking of prescription drugs represent a major threat to public health and to law enforcement. More Ohioans have died in recent years from prescription drug overdoses, legal prescription drug overdoses taken illegally in many cases, than from car accidents. 2008 statistics show that oxycodone and other prescription drugs, namely morphine-based drugs like OxyContin and Percocet, caused more overdoses in Ohio that year than heroin and cocaine combined. Prescription drug abuse is one of the fastest-growing drug problems in the nation, resulting with ever-increasing rates of robberies and other attendant crimes. Yesterday, I was in a Cleveland suburb of Fairview Park at Oliger Drugs. That store has been a target in the last couple of years. I spoke with Tom Oliger, the owner, fourth-generation owner of this drugstore, and he described being held up at gunpoint on more than one occasion. A new report shows drug users and addicts now target seniors for help getting the painkillers to feed their addiction. There's also a rise in the outright theft of stealing these drugs. We're seeing over and over in newscasts and newspapers across the state stories of addicts and criminals targeting pharmacies to obtain painkillers and prescription drugs. Last month in Parma, another Cleveland suburb, a man claiming to have a weapon made off with more than $14,000 worth of prescription painkillers before he was apprehended by the police. That's why I support legislation I've worked with Senator Schumer and others on, strengthening and focusing enforcement to deter organized stealing and enhance safety, the Safe Doses Act. The bill would use federal anti-racketeering laws to arm law enforcement with the tools to stop and prosecute pharmaceutical theft and robberies. Last year, as we toughened penalties for thefts, we must also crack down on the fraud and the trafficking of prescription drugs, and also, of course, deal with the human side of counseling and education to help people break that addiction. Last year, I convened a first-of-its-kind roundtable in southern Ohio, where the problem has been most acute in my state, with federal and local law enforcement, community activists, and elected officials, and members from the medical community. They raised a concern with criminal manipulation of Ohio's Medicaid program, which spends upward of $800 million in prescription medicines. While most prescription pain medicines are used as prescribed after surgery, after some kind of accident, in the case of often people in intense pain from some kind of acute illness. Criminals too often have defrauded the Medicaid system and fleeced Ohio's and America's taxpayers by acquiring multiple prescriptions and filling them in multiple pharmacies. That's why I introduced legislation to require all states to establish Medicaid lock-in programs to crack down on the use of Medicaid cards to obtain and illegally sell these prescription drugs. This bill would prevent drug abusers from acquiring, prescription drug abusers from acquiring excess legal prescription drugs, but they're not doing it legally, which they may abuse or illegally resell by barring them from visiting multiple doctors and pharmacists. It means high-risk prescription drug users would be placed in the program, and they would only get Medicaid assistance when they are limited to one physician in one pharmacy. States would identify prescription drugs that are dispensed under Medicaid and that represent a high risk of overutilization. Nearly 20 states have adopted similar programs. South Carolina's Medicaid lock-in program targeted high-use beneficiaries and resulted in a 43% decrease in the total number of prescribed prescription pain medications. Consider Scioto County on the Ohio River. In this Ohio River town, prescription drugs cause 9 of every 10 fatal drug overdoses. 2/3 of those cases, individuals involved did not have prescriptions, indicating that they obtained the drugs illegally. The Government Accountability Office audited the Medicaid program of the 5 largest states. It found 65,000 cases in which Medicaid beneficiaries visited 6 or more doctors and up to 46 different pharmacies to require prescriptions. The same report found some 1,800 prescriptions written for dead patients and 1,200 prescriptions written by dead physicians. The numbers are staggering. One of the across the country, communities, particularly in southeast Ohio, it's been tragic. Old factory towns and rural communities have become havens for prescription drug abuse. Across the country, communities are struggling to find ways to respond and develop strategies to reduce the diversion and abuse of prescription drugs. Out of the often sad stories, there are successes. Last month, I was in Portsmouth, in Scioto County, that I mentioned earlier, at the Second Chance Counseling Center. It's received critical federal resources, not a lot of dollars, but critical dollars, for a job retraining program for those recovering from abuse. The center is about second chances, combating the epidemic with a focus on recovery and rehabilitation, helping Ohioans with the resources they need to be the productive citizens they want to be. This past July, I was at the Amethyst Family Treatment Residence in Columbus with the Director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, Gil Kurlikowski. We talked about the administration's comprehensive prescription drug strategy in ways that FDA can crack down on the abuse. The staff at the residence, like health professionals, law enforcement, and community activists, describe the stories of victims and families they represent. I met with many of those people who are going through these programs and are getting their lives back in order. Prescription drug abuse and crime is nonpartisan. It's clear it's an issue of life and death in too many parts of our nation, and especially in my state. Mr. President, I'd like to share 3 brief letters describing how this is a human tragedy above and beyond, above all. It's a law enforcement issue. It's a counseling of substance abuse issue. It's an education issue. But fundamentally, it's a human tragedy with the addiction that people have experienced, coupled with the crime that is often committed, coupled with the defrauding of taxpayers. And I would like to just read you 3 stories, letters that were sent to me from my state, one from a rural county, one from a sort of medium-sized county, and one from a large urban county. David from Union County writes, "Our son, David, a college graduate, 42 years old, a father, a husband for 18 years. He abused prescription drugs, pain-killing medication, because of a motorcycle accident 10 years earlier. He was a 3-year clean drug addict because of all the support he was given by so many caring individuals. He was pursuing his master's degree with a 4-point average, but in spite of this, he passed away last May due to an accidental overdose of OxyContin. We need to protect family members from the heartbreak and pain that we suffer because our son made a bad mistake." Amy from Stark County, Canton area, writes, "In our extended family, we have a close family member who's become addicted to prescription drugs. The problem has become so bad for our individual family member that she sought to illegally obtain prescription drugs from dealers 2 counties away. I always had believed that drug abuse was something committed by rebellious, high-risk teenagers and young adults. But prescription drug abuse is something that can happen with much older adults who you would think would know better," she writes. And in Tara from Lucas County, Toledo area, "Throughout my previous job as director of the Anti-Drug Coalition, I personally witnessed many families fall apart because of prescription drug abuse. I'll never forget the day I visited my dear friend at the hospital because her 16-year-old son had overdosed on OxyContin. The average citizen needs to be educated about proper disposal of their drugs, and parents need to be aware of this issue. Better policing and controls around the transportation and distribution of prescription drugs is definitely a key step. However, we can all raise the importance of educating ourselves, our schools, and our children about how to keep this issue from persisting." As I said, Mr. President, it's about law enforcement, it's about drug treatment, it's about education, it's about all of these things to end these human tragedies that cost taxpayer dollars, that inflict criminal activity on innocent pharmacists and others, and create so much tragedy for so many of my state's families and so many American families. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Wisconsin.
Mr. President, in large and small communities across our country, way too many Americans find themselves placed in danger by the very people who are supposed to love and protect them, their families. Each year, more than 2 million women are victims of domestic violence across our country. In Kansas, an estimated 1 in 10 adult women will suffer from domestic abuse this year. I'm here this evening to try to give a voice to the hopeless, to those who have often been too afraid to speak out for themselves. Domestic violence is not just a problem for women. Children and men are all too often its victim as well. Throughout October, during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we are especially mindful of these victims and the urgent need to put an end to the cycle of violence. I can imagine that many Americans assume that domestic violence does not occur in their neighborhoods or among their friends, with those whom they are acquainted with. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Domestic violence does not discriminate by race, gender, age group, education, or social status. And 3 years ago, citizens in my hometown of Hays, Kansas, learned of the tragic death of a young woman from domestic violence. Today, I'd like to share with you the story of Jana Lynn Mackey. I shared Jana's story with my colleagues when I served in the U.S. House of Representatives, but it bears repeating because it's a solemn reminder of the urgent need to put an end to this so-called silent crime that plagues hundreds of thousands of homes across our country. Jana was born in 1982 in Harper, Kansas, and spent her childhood in Hays. She was an active member of 4-H, an athlete, and a talented musician. Upon graduation from high school, Jana completed a bachelor's degree where she discovered her passion, advocating on the behalf of others. She went on to pursue a law degree from the University of Kansas and fought for equality and social justice through her work with countless organizations, including volunteer work in Lawrence, Kansas, at the Guducci Safe Center, a shelter that aids victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. But 3 years ago, on July 3rd, 2008, at the young age of 25, Jana's own life was taken by domestic violence. More than 1,100 people gathered together at Jana's memorial service to celebrate her life. In her death, Jana's parents, Kurt and Christy Brungart, started the 1,100 Torches campaign to encourage 1,100 people to carry on Jana's torch. Since its creation, the campaign has attracted more than 1,100 volunteers who now make a difference in lives across the country through the civic engagement and volunteerism. Yet, there is so much more that must be done. Throughout our country, an estimated 1 in 4 women still suffer abuse during their lifetime. Domestic violence brings fear and hopelessness and depression into the lives of every victim. But we must not only work to end this silent crime, but also we must care for those who are the victims. By volunteering at a local shelter, speaking out when you become aware of domestic violence, or making a donation to a local organization, every citizen can find a way to get involved and make a difference. This October and throughout the year, let us be mindful of the victims of domestic violence and do our part to help break the cycle and bring hope to those who suffer. Let each of us be a torch to see that we bring about an end to domestic or family violence. The tragedy of Jana's death is a rallying cry calling each of us to make a difference in the lives of others. Mr. President, I note the lack of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
objection.
Mr. President, we were hopeful that today we could clear the nomination of John Bryson to be Secretary of Commerce. This has been outstanding for a long time. We are told by our Republican friends that as soon as we got the trade bills done, we would work this out. Well, trade bills are done. So I hope that we can move forward on this. It's really unfortunate that one of the President's very important cabinet positions, that is Secretary of Commerce, which is directly related to the jobs we're trying to create, is not filled at this time. So hopefully we can get the minority to work with us in processing this. I hope I don't have to file cloture on something like this. Mr. President, I ask consent the Senate proceed to calendar number 96.